Joining me now is Rod Beard. He's the Pistons beat writer for the Detroit News. Thanks so much for taking a minute. I know it's been a busy couple of days for you, a couple of weeks, couple months, probably perhaps. But the big news out of Detroit, Cade Cunningham. What's the reaction been like to having him come into the fold in Detroit?
Well, I just think the fans are very ecstatic about it and knowing what the number one pick brings. And they had to suffer through a 20-win season. But to get something out of it finally was heartening for them, that they could feel like, hey, there's something to look forward to for the next couple of years with the talent that he brings.
What kind of player is he?
I think he's just a versatile player who can play a lot of different positions. He's not just a point guard. He's not just a shooting guard and not just a forward. He can do a lot of different things. And he showed that in his 1 year at Oklahoma State, that he can be a facilitator. He can be a scorer. He can play defense as good as any of the other top prospects. So I think that's what they're excited about, is just looking at all of the things that he can bring to the table.
What sense do you get of who he is, Rod, and how he's going to fit within the Pistons organization and inside the locker room?
One of the things that struck me early on is his humility. He doesn't carry that number one pick mentality with him, that everything's going to center around him. He's already said that he wants to gauge how the rest of the team works and just fit in and find where he fits on the court, and to set up and make the team better, make the other players around him better. That's what we saw with him in high school. That's what we saw at Oklahoma State. And I think he's going to carry that over. But just to be 19 years old, he has a maturity that you just don't see very often from young players.
And for those who, are somewhat familiar with the Pistons roster, but maybe aren't as familiar, I mean, how does he fit with the guys that they already have?
Well, with Killian Hayes was the number one draft pick last year, number 7 overall. But there was a lot of hand-wringing about, is Cade going to take his position as the point guard? But they're working already on just how to coexist and how to just be ball handlers and facilitators instead of point guard, shooting guard, small forward in the traditional positions. Like I said, you can move Cade around to a lot of different spots on the floor, but just having multiple facilitators, multiple scorers, is not going to hurt anything else. But Saddiq Bey was on the first team All-Rookie last year. He's the pseudo kind of small forward guy, if you're looking for that. And Isaiah Stewart was on the second team All-Rookie. So they've got a lot of young pieces. Jeremy Grant is playing with the U.S. team over in the Olympics. So there are pieces there that can make them start to grow a little bit more. I wouldn't expect playoffs this year, but they're just building blocks in place that you can see some of the future and what that looks like.
In terms of their playoff projection, is it about chemistry with the guys that they have on the roster now that they've added a couple of these key pieces in terms of their maturation and development, or is there something else specific that you think that they're lacking that would get them over the top to make them a real playoff contender?
Well, I think it is just the maturation process, that they drafted 3 rookies in the first round last year and 1 in the second round who's also in the rotation. Jeremy Grant is the one of the veteran players, but he's only in his 20s still, so they still don't have everything in place. But it's just making the pieces fit on the court and getting them to gel and to play together. And then after that, much like Phoenix did this year, was getting those young guys and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and then fitting Chris Paul in when the timing was right. So I think it's just the development and the grooming process right now. And then as they move forward and they maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, they're ready to add that big time veteran that can help to push them into a playoff position.
You mentioned Chris Paul. Were you surprised to see the deal that he did?
I was shocked at first, because I said, how do you turn down $44 million or whatever his contract number was? Well, if you're going to go back and get a full bag and get $120 million over 3 years, then it's sort of, well, yeah, now this makes sense. But yeah, I think that's more of a reward for what he brought to them, and they're relevant. They won the Western Conference. Came a couple games short of winning the championship, but they're back in the middle of things, and the West is going to be super, super tough coming next year with all the moves we've seen in free agency so far. So just having them be back in that conversation is good for the Phoenix area.
Is Cade Cunningham and some of the other younger pieces that you mentioned around him, is he the type of player that could have a transformative effect on the Pistons and really almost take them to like a storybook ending, similar to how we saw, with Chris Paul, whether they put a veteran in or not? I mean, is that the kind of caliber talent that we're talking about?
I think so. I think because he can do so many things, every team has to battle injuries, and the Pistons did last year with Killian Hayes missing about 3 or 4 months. So they just had trouble filling that gap at point guard. Now you have Hayes who can do that. And again, he plays so many different positions that if you're in foul trouble, if you have an injury, if you have other things throughout the season that set you back a little bit, you have some flexibility and some versatility with Cunningham. It's not 2 or 3 different guys you have to go and get off the bench in order to replace some of that skill set. You can do that mainly with him.
What do you think? Just share some insight with us in the decision-making process. When did the organization know that was the player that they ultimately wanted?
Well, according to General Manager Troy Weaver, it was on the draft morning, on Thursday morning, that they finally decided. And there was a lot of questioning and going back and forth about whether it might be Jalen Green or someone else. And I think they were just trying to find the right trade package if they were going to trade down to number 2 to make that happen. And it just didn't exist. It didn't seem that they would be able to go in a different direction, get the full value of that number 1 pick, and have a player that they coveted the same sort of way. So they said it was just Thursday morning, and they had talked about it. They flew to New York on the night before the draft and met with Cunningham again, just to make sure all of the details were in place, and they were sure that he was going to be the right pick. And then they let him know on Thursday morning that was going to be the case. So I think they did their due diligence. They made sure that they were getting the player that they wanted in this draft, and they didn't have any second guesses or doubts about it.
Was there anything that you took away from his initial press conference or spending time with him or covering him? I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that. I'm sure Summer League will lend itself to that. But what have you kind of gathered so far and sensed so far? You mentioned his personality, that he'll probably be a fit in the locker room, and his maturity. Is there anything else that you've gleaned from, just the immediate aftermath of him becoming a Piston?
Yeah, I was in New York for the draft, so I got to see him sort of behind the scenes. And in those situations, you have the media tour that you've got to do and do a hit here and a hit over there and talk to so many different people. And what I noticed in that is that he just didn't lose his composure. He repeated a lot of the same answers for different people. And for some people, that gets very frustrating, that it's, well, I've got to say this again, and now I've got to do this thing for this network and that network and this newspaper and that one. He handled it all with a different level of maturity than I've seen. Is that he was excited for each one. He was eager to meet people and shake their hands and talk to people, and just the humility that was there. And again, there were some other draft picks in the room who were a little bit different in how they handled things, that they were the man, they were going to be the star. He was just looking to try to fit into the Pistons framework and how he could help them be a better team by making the people around him better. And that stuck out to me. That you just don't see that very much. And I've covered drafts for years and seen stars come into training camp and do other things that have different outlooks on these things, and his just seems to be a little bit different. And again, he's only 19 years old. This is something that 20, 21, 22-year-old guys haven't mastered yet, and he seems to have a good hold on it.
So ultimately, Rod, is Cunningham the right choice in your estimation so far for the organization?
I think so, but it's still very early. You don't get points for being nice or being the most mature kid. You've got to go out there and be able to produce and score and help to elevate this team. He may not do it with his scoring only. There's so many more facets to his game, but I think it's just going to take some time. And again, only 19 years old. He's going to mature physically a little bit more too. And when they get him in strength and conditioning, then that's going to show as well. But I think it's just we'll see a little bit, some snippets of it in Summer League, but when the season starts is when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, what do you expect to see in Summer League? I mean, what will you be looking for?
Well, I'll be looking for, because the Pistons have so many young guys, a lot of them will be on that Summer League team. Killian Hayes will be, Sadiq Bey will be. I'm just looking for the chemistry there, that they play well together and they know where they're supposed to be on the court, and that camaraderie is there. Because again, we're coming off a pandemic sort of year, and they didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time outside and do a lot of things. And in Vegas, I think they'll spread out and do that more. So how do they connect as teammates on and off the court is something I'll be looking for.
Just lastly, Rod, I appreciate the time. Before I let you go, I'm curious, just you've covered the league for such a long time. Your thoughts on USA basketball, Kevin Durant being Kevin Durant, but have you picked up any other kind of nuggets along the way in watching the team at all, if you've had an opportunity to do that?
Yeah, in their preliminary games, there was that initial panic after they lost those 2 games that, hey, this just isn't going to work, and what are these guys doing? And one of my initial comments was, hey, you're going to get Devin Booker and Drew Holiday soon enough when they're done with the finals. So this is going to be fine. Just calm down and relax a little bit. And we've seen that a little bit. Drew Holiday has come in and played very, very well, especially on the defensive end. And we've seen what Kevin Durant can do. I'm just surprised that they're not a little bit more gelled themselves. But when you have a training camp that's maybe a week or so, and guys who are used to being the 1A guy on their team, and now you bring them into a setting where they have to defer a little bit more and figure out who the lead scorer is going to be, for example, that there's going to be some trouble with that. But I think it's going to be all right. They're going to medal more than likely. And it's just a case of how can they put that together? Can they get this big win that they need to get into the gold medal game?
How far do you think this most recent NBA Finals run went to kind of alerting everybody to the caliber of player that Drew Holiday is? I mean, I know if you've been following the league, when he first came to Milwaukee, everyone was like, oh, that's the defensive piece that they needed. This guy is a perfect fit. And you think about like veterans or players that, are defensive specialists that step onto these teams and immediately change the complexion of the roster. And so, what do you think his legacy will be? Or I'm not sure that that's the right term, but I mean, how far did this recent finals run go to cementing his status as one of the top defensive players in the game?
Well, it should have opened some eyes for folks who didn't know what he was already capable of doing. And for the Bucks, they had cycled through so many point guards with George Hill, just wasn't quite it. And they had gotten so far and realized, hey, this is the guy we need. We need a defensive stopper. And it worked out well because you need a guy who can guard either a Chris Paul or a Devin Booker. And those are two potent scorers, as we saw in the finals. And he was able to be effective in that. If there's nothing else, the play that he made to get the steal late in the I think it was game 5.
Oh my gosh.
To be able to do, that's his hallmark. Put that on his next contract and say, this is the value, is a guy like this who can come in and make a play for you when you really need it. And on that team, you don't need him to score a lot. You need him to play a stout defense and to guard the other team's best backcourt player, their best scorer. And he showed that he can do that. So lifting them to a championship team level is what Drew Holiday did. There weren't very many other additions, but I think that was the big difference when it came down to it.
Just last one for you, Rod, because I probably kept you too long already. But
no, you're fine.
You think about USA basketball and, like you said, maybe some chemistry gelling issues and then getting some of those players who made a really deep run in the playoffs and that they'll probably be fine in medal. But, I kind of look at it and think, wow, what a cool way to underscore how global the game of basketball is. I mean, It's been global for a long time, but I mean, have you seen something different this past summer just in terms of the wealth being spread? I mean, you look at the league and guys are coming from all over the world, and that's been reflected on the Olympic stage too. It's a lot tougher.
Well, all you have to do is look at that Spain game and just the toughness that they showed. And when you look at the Nigeria roster and you see a lot of NBA names on there, they may not be star level or starter level players, but you're seeing a lot more NBA names on these international rosters. Spain had them, Australia has them, France has them. So it's not just one guy that you maybe heard of. Now you've got Rudy Gobert. There are a number of guys on a lot of these rosters who are NBA stars and who can play on an international stage. And the U.S. can't dominate the same way that they did forever. It's cliche now. We say that every Olympics or every international competition, but it's so true that now this talent pool is being spread around to so many other countries, and you can't just put 5 Americans together and say, hey, we're going to go and win us a gold medal. You got to have a deep team that checks a lot of the boxes in terms of their skill sets, and they're able to go in and play hard. And again, that chemistry is going to be a big piece of that.
All right, Rob Beard from the Detroit News. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate the insight.
Anytime. I had a blast. Thank you.